You thought I was just an IT guy, but I'm your sentence.
My wife Claire announced she wanted an open marriage at my father's 62nd birthday party, right between the potato salad and my aunt's famous apple pie, just like that. No warning, no discussion, just a casual mention that she'd be sleeping with her boss, Rick, starting next week. "It's perfectly normal these days, Adam," she said, stabbing her fork into the pie like she was making a point. Mature couples explore their options. Rick says it's the evolved way to handle relationships. I nearly choked on my beer. Rick says? Your boss, Rick? The guy who looks like he bench presses his own ego? Claire rolled her eyes. Don't be crude. Rick is sophisticated. He understands that monogamy is an outdated concept designed to suppress human nature. My father Frank, sitting across from us at the picnic table, went completely still. When my dad goes quiet, smart people start looking for exits. He'd spent 30 years working construction, building half the suburbs around Chicago with his bare hands, and he had zero tolerance for what he called fancy nonsense. Excuse me? Frank's voice could have cut steel. Did you just tell my son you're planning to cheat on him? Claire's face flushed red. It's not cheating if we're both consenting adults who... Bees. Frank stood up, all 6 feet 2 inches of him casting a shadow over our table. You took vows. In a church. I was there. The whole backyard went quiet. My cousins stopped their card game. My Uncle Jerry turned down the radio. Even the neighbor's dog stopped barking. Claire tried to salvage the situation. Frank, I understand this might seem unusual to your generation, but modern relationships require flexibility and... My generation? Frank laughed, but there was no humor in it. Honey, my generation knew the difference between commitment and convenience. We didn't dress up selfishness in fancy words and call it evolution. I should have said something. Should have defended my wife or told my father to back off. Instead, I sat there like an idiot, watching my marriage implode over dessert. Claire gathered her purse and stood up. I don't have to listen to this backward thinking. Adam, when you're ready to have an adult conversation about our future, you know where to find me. She stormed out, her heels clicking across the patio like sharp cracks. Frank sat back down and took a long pull from his beer. Son, I've seen a lot of things in my life. Built houses for rich folks, poor folks, and everything in between. But I've never seen anyone throw away something good just because they got bored. She's just going through something, I said, though I didn't believe it myself. Maybe it's a midlife crisis, or maybe it's time you stopped making excuses for her. Frank's voice was gentle but firm. That woman just disrespected you, me, and this entire family. And she did it with a smile on her face. I drove home alone that night, my mind racing. Claire and I had been married for 8 years. Sure, things had gotten routine. We both worked demanding jobs. I was an IT specialist for a mid-sized consulting firm, and she was an HR manager at a downtown office complex. We'd talked about kids, but never quite got around to it. We'd talked about a lot of things and never quite got around to them. But an open marriage? With her boss? When I got home, Claire was in the bedroom, packing a suitcase. Going somewhere? I asked. Rick has a spare room at his condo. I think we both need some space to process this conversation. Process what conversation? You made an announcement, Claire. That's not the same thing as having a discussion. She turned to face me, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger or frustration, but something colder. Calculation. Adam, I've been thinking about this for months. Our marriage has become stale. We're like roommates who occasionally have love. I want more than that. So we work on it. We go to counseling. We take a vacation. We don't just blow everything up because you've got the hots for your boss. Claire zipped up her suitcase. This isn't just about Rick. This is about me finally being honest about what I want. I want excitement. I want passion. I want to feel alive again. And you can't feel alive with me? She paused at the bedroom door. When's the last time you surprised me, Adam? When's the last time you did something spontaneous or romantic or just different? I thought about it, really thought about it. Last month, I brought you flowers. Gas station flowers, on your way home from work, because you forgot our anniversary. She had me there. Claire, marriage isn't supposed to be a constant thrill ride. It's supposed to be partnership, stability, building something together. Maybe that's enough for you, she said, but it's not enough for me anymore. After she left, I sat in our kitchen, my kitchen now, I supposed, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. 8 years of marriage, gone, just like that. I called my business partner, Pete, figuring I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't judge me for being a complete failure as a husband. She said, "What?" Pete's voice crackled through the phone. He was probably at Murphy's Tavern, his second office. An open marriage with her boss? Jesus, Adam, that's cold even for Claire. Pete had never liked Claire. He thought she was pretentious and controlling. I'd always figured he was just being protective, the way guys are with their friends' wives. Now I wondered if he'd seen something I'd missed. Maybe she's right, I said. Maybe I did get too comfortable, too predictable. Bees, you're a good husband. You work hard, you don't cheat, you don't gamble away the mortgage money. If that's not good enough for her, that's her problem. But what if... Adam, listen to me. I've been married 3 times. Trust me when I tell you that when a woman starts talking about open marriages, the marriage is already over. She's just trying to make you the bad guy for not going along with it. I hung up and poured myself a scotch. Then another. By the time I went to bed, I'd finished half the bottle and made a decision. If Claire wanted excitement, I'd give her excitement. Just not the kind she was expecting. The next morning, I woke up with a hangover and a plan. Well, the beginning of a plan. Claire wanted to play games? Fine, but she'd forgotten one important detail. I was an IT specialist. I understood systems, networks, and vulnerabilities. And after 8 years of marriage, I knew all of Claire's vulnerabilities. I started with reconnaissance. Claire worked at Meridian Plaza, a glass and steel monument to corporate mediocrity downtown. Rick Devlin was the regional facilities manager, which meant he controlled everything from parking assignments to office temperature. It was a position that gave him just enough authority to feel important, and just enough access to misuse that authority. I'd met Rick exactly twice. Once at Claire's company Christmas party, where he'd spent the entire evening talking about his CrossFit routine and his motorcycle. The second time was at a barbecue at Claire's coworker Jan's house, where he'd cornered me for 20 minutes, explaining why my Honda Civic was basically a toy car for people who'd given up on life. Rick was 45, divorced, and had the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from being mediocre at everything but too stupid to realize it. He wore expensive suits that didn't quite fit and cologne that could be detected from orbit. In short, he was exactly the kind of man who would convince a bored housewife that an open marriage was sophisticated instead of just sad. I called Pete and asked him to meet me for lunch. Pete Kowalski had been my business partner for 3 years. We ran a small IT consulting firm that specialized in helping local businesses upgrade their networks and security systems. Pete was streetwise in a way I'd never been, having grown up in the kind of neighborhood where you learned early that the world wasn't fair and nobody was coming to save you. "So what's the plan?" Pete asked as we sat in a booth at Tony's Deli, surrounded by the smell of pastrami and disappointment. "I want to make Rick's life interesting," I said. "Nothing illegal, nothing violent, just educational." Pete grinned. "Educational, I like that. What did you have in mind?" "Rick drives a BMW, Silver 3 Series. Parks it in the executive section of the Meridian Plaza garage every day. And BMWs have notoriously sensitive alarm systems. Very easy to trigger accidentally. Also, the paint is susceptible to certain types of adhesive materials." Pete's grin widened. "You want to mess with his car? I want to help him understand that actions have consequences." We spent the next hour planning what Pete called Operation Humble Pie. It was juvenile, sure, but sometimes juvenile is exactly what the situation calls for. That evening, I drove to Meridian Plaza and waited. Claire's Honda was still in the garage, along with Rick's BMW. At 7:30, they emerged from the elevator together, laughing about something. Claire looked happier than I'd seen her in months. They walked to Rick's car, and I watched through binoculars as Rick tried to impress Claire by opening her door with a flourish. What he didn't expect was the industrial-strength superglue that Pete and I had applied to the door handle earlier that afternoon. Rick's hand stuck fast to the handle. For a moment, he just stood there, confused. Then he started pulling, then yanking, then cursing loud enough to echo through the parking garage. Claire tried to help, which resulted in her getting her designer purse strap tangled in Rick's stuck arm. The harder they struggled, the more ridiculous they looked. I started recording with my phone. It took them 15 minutes and a maintenance worker with a bottle of acetone to get Rick free. By then, a small crowd had gathered, including several of Claire's coworkers. Rick's face was red with embarrassment and rage. Claire looked like she wanted to disappear into the concrete. But the real masterpiece was what they discovered when they finally got the door open. Pete and I had filled Rick's car with packing peanuts. Thousands of them. They poured out of the car like a polystyrene avalanche, covering Rick's expensive shoes and Claire's dress. I uploaded the video to YouTube that night with the title, Executive Parking Fail. It got 47 views in the first hour. The next day, I decided to escalate things. I called Meridian Plaza's main number and asked to be transferred to Human Resources. Hi, this is Adam Reno. I'm calling to report a potential workplace harassment situation involving one of your managers. The HR representative, a woman named Sandra, sounded bored. What kind of harassment, sir? Inappropriate harassment. I have reason to believe that Rick Devlin is using his position to coerce female employees into inappropriate relationships. Do you have specific evidence of this behavior? I have video evidence of Mr. Devlin engaging in inappropriate physical contact with a subordinate in the company parking garage. I'd be happy to provide it for your investigation. There was a long pause. Can you email that to our confidential reporting address? Absolutely. I sent the parking garage video along with a carefully worded explanation that raised concerns about Rick's conduct. I made sure to mention that the female employee appeared distressed by the situation and that Rick seemed to be forcibly restraining her. It wasn't technically a lie. Claire had looked distressed. Rick had been restraining her, albeit because his hand was glued to his car door. Context is everything. 2 days later, Pete called me with an update. Your boy Rick got called into HR yesterday. Spent 2 hours in there. Word is they're opening an investigation. How do you know that? My cousin Diane works in the Meridian Plaza cafeteria. She hears everything. Apparently Rick came out of that meeting looking like someone had just told him his motorcycle was actually a scooter. I felt a surge of satisfaction. What about Claire? Also got called in. Diane says she looked nervous as heck. Kept checking her phone every 5 seconds. That evening, Claire called me. Adam, we need to talk. I thought you were done talking to me. Something about me not being evolved enough for your sophisticated lifestyle. Don't be an A. This is serious. Someone filed a complaint against Rick at work. They're investigating him for misconduct harassment. That's terrible, I said, trying to sound concerned. I hope it's not true. Of course it's not true. Rick would never... He's not like that. How can you be sure? You've only known him as your boss. Maybe he has a pattern of this kind of behavior. Because I know him, Adam. We've gotten close. Right, the open marriage thing. How's that working out for you? There was a long pause. It's complicated. I bet it is. Especially now that your boyfriend is under investigation for misconduct harassment. That's got to put a damper on the whole evolved relationship thing. Adam, did you... She stopped herself. Did I what? Nothing. Never mind. But I could hear it in her voice. Suspicion. Fear. She was starting to realize that her perfect plan might have some flaws. After I hung up, I poured myself a scotch and started planning phase 2. Rick and Claire wanted to play adult games? Fine. But they were about to learn that some adults play for keeps. The HR investigation into Rick lasted exactly 1 week. Not because he was cleared of wrongdoing, but because the video evidence was deemed inconclusive, and Claire refused to cooperate with the investigation. According to Pete's cousin Diane, Claire told HR that the parking garage incident was a misunderstanding, and that she had no concerns about Rick's professional conduct. The case was closed with a note in Rick's file and a mandatory misconduct harassment training session for all managers. Rick thought he'd won. That was his first mistake. I spent the weekend doing what I did best, research. Rick Devlin wasn't just Claire's boss. He was a small-time tyrant who'd been misusing his position for years. A little digging into public records revealed 3 formal complaints filed against him in the past 2 years, all dismissed due to insufficient evidence or uncooperative witnesses. Rick had a pattern. He targeted women who needed their jobs, who couldn't afford to make waves, single mothers, recent graduates, anyone vulnerable. He'd offer career advancement in exchange for flexibility and team spirit. When they refused, their work assignments got harder, their schedules got worse, their performance reviews suffered. But Claire wasn't vulnerable. She was complicit. I found this out on Tuesday evening when I followed them to Brennan's, an upscale restaurant downtown. I sat at the bar, nursing a beer and pretending to watch the Cubs game while they had dinner 2 tables away. Their conversation was illuminating. Sandra in HR is still asking questions, Rick said, cutting into his steak. She wants to know why you changed your story. I told her the truth, Claire replied, that the whole thing was blown out of proportion. But she's not buying it. She thinks we're involved. So what if we are? There's no company policy against relationships between managers and employees from different departments. Rick leaned forward, lowering his voice. There is if one of those employees is married and filing false harassment reports to cover it up. I nearly dropped my beer. False harassment reports? That wasn't false, Claire said. Someone really did file a complaint against you. We just interpreted the situation differently than intended. Claire, if anyone finds out that you helped me dismiss legitimate complaints by making it look like this was all about our relationship, we're both screwed. No one's going to find out. The other women won't come forward now. They'll assume I'm protecting you because we're sleeping together, which makes their word against ours. Rick smiled. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. I learned from the best. I sat there, processing what I'd just heard. This wasn't just about an affair or an open marriage. Rick had been inappropriately harassing women at work, and Claire had helped him cover it up by making herself look like a willing participant instead of another victim. Except she wasn't a victim. She was an accomplice. I finished my beer and left, my mind racing. This changed everything. Rick and Claire weren't just cheating on me. They were destroying other women's careers and lives. The 3 complaints that had been dismissed, those were real women with real grievances who'd been silenced by Claire's performance. The next morning, I called in sick and drove to the public library. I needed to do some serious research, and I couldn't risk using my home or office computer for what I had in mind. It took me 4 hours to track down the 3 women who'd filed complaints against Rick. Jennifer Martinez, a single mother who'd worked in accounting until she was suddenly downsized 6 months ago. Lisa Chen, a recent college graduate who'd quit her job in facilities coordination after 3 months, citing personal reasons. And Sarah Williams, a marketing assistant who'd transferred to a different department after filing a complaint that was dismissed for lack of evidence. I found Jennifer first. She was working as a waitress at a diner in Schaumburg, pulling double shifts to make ends meet after losing her job at Meridian Plaza. Excuse me, I said, approaching her table during a slow afternoon. Are you Jennifer Martinez? She looked up, suspicious. Who's asking? My name is Adam Reno. I think we have a mutual acquaintance, Rick Devlin. Her face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, and I think you deserve to know that he's still doing it, still harassing women at work, still getting away with it. Jennifer glanced around the empty diner, then sat down across from me. What do you want? I want to help you get justice, and I want to stop him from hurting anyone else. Justice, Jennifer laughed bitterly. Do you know what justice looks like for a single mother? With no college degree and a misconduct harassment complaint on her employment record? It looks like serving coffee to truckers for $8 an hour, plus tips. What if I told you there was a way to make Rick pay for what he did, without lawyers, without courts, without any risk to you? Jennifer studied my face. I'd say you sound like someone with a personal grudge. You'd be right. Rick is sleeping with my wife. But that doesn't mean he doesn't deserve what's coming to him. I spent the next hour listening to Jennifer's story. Rick had promised her a promotion to senior accountant if she'd be flexible about working late and attending private meetings in his office. When she refused his advances, her workload doubled. Her performance reviews became hypercritical, and she was eventually laid off in a restructuring that eliminated exactly one position, hers. The worst part, Jennifer said, was that everyone knew what was happening, but no one would say anything. There was this woman in HR, Claire something, who made it seem like I was just a disgruntled employee making false accusations because I was bitter about my job performance. Claire Reno, I said. My wife. Jennifer stared at me. Your wife destroyed my career to protect her boyfriend. Ex-wife, I corrected. And yes, she did, but we're going to fix that. I found Lisa Chen working at a coffee shop near Northwestern University. Her story was similar, but worse. Rick had cornered her in the supply closet during her second week on the job and made it clear that her continued employment depended on her attitude toward management. I quit the next day, Lisa said. I couldn't afford to quit, but I couldn't afford to stay either. My parents were so disappointed. They'd sacrificed everything to put me through college, and I couldn't even keep my first real job for a month. Sarah Williams was harder to track down, but I eventually found her working in the marketing department of a small nonprofit. She'd managed to stay at Meridian Plaza by transferring departments, but the experience had left her scared and demoralized. I see him in the hallways sometimes, Sarah said when I called her. He smiles at me like we share some kind of secret. It makes me sick. What if I told you there was a way to make sure he never smiled at you again? I'd say you don't understand how this works. Men like Rick Devlin don't face consequences. They just find new victims. Maybe, but what if this time was different? By Thursday evening, I had everything I needed. 3 detailed statements from Rick's victims, documentation of the dismissed complaints, and a plan that would destroy both Rick and Claire without breaking a single law. I called Pete and asked him to meet me at Murphy's Tavern. You look like a man with a plan, Pete said, sliding into the booth across from me. I am, and it's a good one. Lay it on me. I pulled out a folder and spread the contents across the table. Rick Devlin has been misconduct harassing women at Meridian Plaza for years. My wife has been helping him cover it up. They think they're untouchable because they've silenced their victims and manipulated the system. Pete whistled low. That's some serious crap, Adam. It gets worse. They're planning to expand their operation. Rick just got promoted to regional manager, which means he'll have authority over 3 other office buildings. That's hundreds more potential victims. So what's the plan? I smiled. We're going to give Rick and Claire exactly what they deserve. Public humiliation, career destruction, and a front row seat to watch their perfect little scheme collapse. I'm listening. Tomorrow is Friday. Meridian Plaza is hosting their annual company picnic in Grant Park. All employees, all managers, all the corporate executives from the home office. Rick is supposed to give a presentation about workplace excellence and professional conduct. Pete grinned. And he's going to give a very different presentation than he planned. The Meridian Plaza Company picnic was everything I'd expected. Forced corporate fun with a side of passive-aggressive networking. Employees clustered in uncomfortable groups, making small talk while keeping one eye on their supervisors. Management worked the crowd with practiced smiles and firm handshakes, pretending they remembered everyone's names. Rick held court near the main pavilion, surrounded by junior employees who laughed too hard at his jokes and nodded enthusiastically at his observations about market trends. He was wearing khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost more than Jennifer Martinez made in a week at the diner. Claire stood beside him, playing the role of supportive colleague perfectly. She'd dressed down for the occasion, jeans and a blouse instead of her usual business attire, but she still managed to look like she was slumming it with the common folk. I watched them from across the park, sitting at a picnic table with Pete and a laptop computer. We'd spent the morning setting up what Pete called the world's most educational PowerPoint presentation. You sure about this? Pete asked, adjusting the portable projector we'd hidden behind a tree. Once we start this thing, there's no going back. I'm sure. At 2 p.m., Rick took the makeshift stage to deliver his presentation on excellence in leadership, building a culture of respect and professionalism. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Ladies and gentlemen, Rick began, his voice carrying across the park through the rented sound system, I want to talk to you today about what it means to be a leader in the modern workplace. That was my cue. I pressed a button on my laptop and Rick's prepared PowerPoint presentation disappeared from the projection screen behind him. In its place appeared a single slide with large, bold text, Excellence in Leadership, the Rick Devlin Method. Rick glanced back at the screen, confused. He tapped his presentation remote, but nothing happened. Technical difficulties, he said with a forced laugh. The next slide appeared. Step 1. Identify vulnerable targets. A murmur went through the crowd. Rick's face went pale. This isn't my presentation, he said, looking around frantically. Someone's hacked into the system. Step 2. Use your position to coerce improper favors. The murmur became a buzz of shocked conversation. Rick abandoned his remote and started walking toward the projection equipment, but Pete had hidden it well. Step 3. Silence victims through intimidation and retaliation. Rick found the projector and started yanking cables, but the damage was done. The entire company was staring at the screen, reading words that perfectly described Rick's method of operation. But I wasn't finished. The final slide appeared. Case studies in excellence, followed by detailed summaries of Jennifer Martinez's, Lisa Chen's, and Sarah Williams' experiences. Names, dates, specific incidents, and documentation of how each complaint had been dismissed or ignored. Rick finally managed to disconnect the projector, but it was too late. 300 Meridian Plaza employees had just learned that their facilities manager was a serial manipulator, and their HR department was complicit in covering it up. The crowd was buzzing with shocked conversation. Several people were already pulling out their phones, taking pictures of the blank screen and typing furiously. Claire pushed through the crowd toward Rick, her face a mask of panic and rage. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her body language suggested it wasn't supportive. Rick grabbed the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just saw was a malicious attack by a disgruntled former employee. These allegations are completely false and, no, they're not. The voice came from the back of the crowd. Jennifer Martinez stepped forward, wearing her diner uniform because she'd come straight from her shift. My name is Jennifer Martinez, she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. I used to work in accounting at Meridian Plaza until Rick Devlin destroyed my career because I wouldn't sleep with him. The crowd parted as Jennifer walked toward the stage. Behind her came Lisa Chen and Sarah Williams. I'm Lisa Chen, Lisa said. Rick Devlin inappropriately harassed me during my first week on the job. When I reported it, I was told there wasn't enough evidence to pursue an investigation. Sarah Williams, Sarah added. Rick Devlin made my work life heck for 6 months until I agreed to transfer departments just to get away from him. Rick stood frozen on the stage, the microphone still in his hand. Claire had disappeared into the crowd, probably looking for an exit. These women are lying, Rick finally managed. This is all a setup, a conspiracy to destroy my reputation. Prove it, Jennifer said. Show them your employment records. Show them the complaints that were filed against you. Show them the performance reviews you gave us after we refused your advances. Rick looked around desperately, searching for support from his colleagues. He found none. The other managers were backing away from him, like he had a contagious disease. I don't have to prove anything, Rick said. I'm the victim here. This is harassment. This is defamation. This is justice, I said, stepping out of the crowd. Rick's eyes found mine, and I saw recognition dawn on his face. You did this. I facilitated it, I corrected, but you did this to yourself. Every choice, every victim, every cover-up. That was all you. You're Claire's husband, the pathetic loser who couldn't satisfy his own wife. I smiled. Ex-husband. And you're right, I couldn't satisfy her. Turns out she has very specific needs, like helping inappropriate predators destroy innocent women's lives. That's not really my thing. Rick dropped the microphone and jumped down from the stage, heading straight for me. He was bigger than me, probably stronger, but he was also panicked and stupid. I stepped aside as he lunged, and Rick went sprawling into a picnic table covered with potato salad and coleslaw. The table collapsed, dumping food all over Rick's expensive polo shirt. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Someone started recording with their phone. Within minutes, executive faceplants into potato salad would be trending on social media. Rick struggled to his feet, covered in mayonnaise and humiliation. This isn't over, he snarled. Yes, it is, said a voice from behind him. We all turned to see a woman in a business suit approaching the stage. She was flanked by 2 security guards and looked like someone who was used to being obeyed. I'm Margaret Walsh, Vice President of Human Resources for Meridian Plaza's parent company, she announced. Mr. Devlin, you're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. Rick's mouth fell open. You can't do this. I have a contract. I have rights. You had rights, Walsh corrected. You forfeited them when you decided to use your position to inappropriately harass employees and cover up misconduct. Our legal department will be in touch regarding potential criminal charges. The security guards moved in, flanking Rick on both sides. He looked around the crowd one more time, searching for any sign of support or sympathy. He found none. As they escorted him away, Rick's eyes found mine again. This is your fault, he said. All of this is your fault. No, I replied. This is your consequence. After Rick was gone, Margaret Walsh addressed the crowd. She apologized for the company's failures, announced a comprehensive review of all HR policies, and promised that anyone who had experienced harassment would be given a fair hearing. Jennifer, Lisa, and Sarah were invited to meet with the legal department to discuss their cases. All three would eventually receive settlements and job offers from other companies in Meridian Plaza's network. But I wasn't finished yet. Rick was gone, but Claire was still out there somewhere, probably planning her next move. I found her in the parking lot, sitting in her Honda and crying. "Rough day?" I asked, tapping on her window. She rolled it down, her mascara streaked and her face blotchy from tears. "You destroyed everything." "I exposed everything. There's a difference. Rick's career's over. His reputation is ruined. He'll never work in management again." "Good. Maybe he'll learn a trade. I hear construction is hiring." "What about me, Adam? What about my career? My reputation?" I leaned down so we were eye to eye. "What about Jennifer Martinez's career? What about Lisa Chen's reputation? What about Sarah Williams's future?" "That's different." "How?" It was complicated. You don't understand the dynamics involved. I understand that you helped an inappropriate predator destroy innocent women's lives because it was convenient for your affair." Claire wiped her eyes with a tissue. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I was protecting myself." "From what?" "From Rick. From the same thing that happened to them." I stared at her, processing this revelation. "Rick was harassing you, too?" "At first, but then I realized I could use it. If I played along, if I made it look like I wanted it, then I had power over him instead of the other way around." "So you threw other women under the bus to save yourself." "I survived. That's what matters." "No, Claire, that's what makes you worse than Rick. He's a predator, but you're a collaborator. You had choices, and you chose to sacrifice innocent people for your own benefit." Claire started her car. "I'm leaving, Adam. I'm moving to Phoenix. My sister has a job lined up for me there." "Running away?" "Starting over. Something you should consider." "I don't need to start over. I need to finish what I started." She drove away without another word, leaving me standing in the parking lot with Pete and the three women whose lives Rick had tried to destroy. "So what now?" Pete asked. I looked around at the aftermath of Rick's public destruction. The crowd was dispersing, but people were still talking, still processing what they'd witnessed. Rick's career was over, Claire was gone, and justice had been served. But I wasn't satisfied yet. Rick and Claire had gotten off too easy. They'd lost their jobs and their reputations, but they'd walk away with their freedom and their savings accounts intact. That was about to change. 3 weeks after the company picnic, I received an unexpected phone call. "Mr. Reno, this is Detective Sarah Morrison with the Chicago Police Department. I'd like to speak with you about Rick Devlin." My heart skipped a beat. "What about him?" "We're investigating several complaints of misconduct harassment and potential criminal misconduct. Your name came up as someone who might have relevant information." I met Detective Morrison at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park the next morning. She was a serious woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the kind of direct manner that suggested she'd seen enough BS to last several lifetimes. "Tell me about your relationship with Rick Devlin," she said, pulling out a notebook. "He was sleeping with my wife, ex-wife now." "And that's why you orchestrated the incident at the company picnic?" "I orchestrated the truth being told publicly. What Rick did to those women was criminal. What my ex-wife did to help him was despicable." Detective Morrison nodded. "We've spoken with Jennifer Martinez, Lisa Chen, and Sarah Williams. Their stories are consistent and detailed. We've also reviewed employment records and internal communications from Meridian Plaza. And we have enough evidence to charge Rick Devlin with misconduct harassment, misuse of power, and potentially extortion. The problem is he's disappeared." I set down my coffee cup. "Disappeared? Left his apartment, closed his bank accounts, disconnected his phone. We have reason to believe he's fled the state, possibly the country." "What about Claire, my ex-wife?" "Claire Reno is also missing. She was supposed to report for an interview with our department yesterday and failed to appear. Her sister in Phoenix says she never arrived there." I felt a chill run down my spine. Rick and Claire were gone, vanished like smoke. All my careful planning, all the evidence I'd gathered, all the justice I'd delivered, it meant nothing if they'd escaped. "Do you have any idea where they might have gone?" Detective Morrison asked. "No, but I might know someone who does." That afternoon, I drove to Jennifer Martinez's apartment. She was getting ready for her shift at the diner, but she agreed to talk when I explained the situation. Rick kept talking about his boat, she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. He was always bragging about this cabin cruiser he kept at some marina, said it was his escape from the stress of management. Did he ever mention which marina? Somewhere up north, I think. Michigan, maybe? He said it was far enough away that he could disappear for weeks without anyone finding him. I called Detective Morrison with the information, then spent the evening researching marinas in Michigan. There were dozens of them along the coast, from small fishing harbors to massive yacht clubs. Finding Rick's boat would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. But I had an advantage. I knew Rick's ego. Rick Devlin wasn't the kind of man who'd hide in some rundown fishing village. He'd want luxury, comfort, and the ability to impress people with his wealth. That narrowed the search considerably. I spent 2 days calling upscale marinas, pretending to be an old friend trying to reconnect with Rick. On the third try, I hit pay dirt. "Oh, you mean Rick with the Meridian Dream?" the marina attendant said. "Yeah, he's been here about a week. Slip 47. Nice boat, but he's kind of an a-hole, you know?" Harbor Springs Marina was a 4-hour drive from Chicago. I called Pete and asked him to meet me there. "You sure about this?" Pete asked as we drove north on I-94. "Maybe we should let the cops handle it. The cops can't cross state lines without a warrant, and Rick will be gone by the time they get one. Besides, I want to look him in the eye when his perfect escape plan falls apart." We arrived at Harbor Springs just after sunset. The marina was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive boats, manicured grounds, and the kind of artificial perfection that rich people paid for when they wanted to play at being sailors. Slip 47 housed the 30-foot cabin cruiser named Meridian Dream. The boat was dark, but I could see movement through the windows. "Now what?" Pete whispered. "Now we wait." We didn't have to wait long. At 9 p.m., Rick emerged from the cabin, dressed in shorts and a polo shirt, carrying a bottle of wine. He walked down the dock toward the marina's restaurant, whistling softly to himself. "He looks pretty relaxed for a fugitive," Pete observed. "That's about to change." I called Detective Morrison and gave her the marina's address. Then Pete and I settled in to watch Rick's last night of freedom. Rick spent 2 hours at the restaurant, drinking wine and flirting with a woman who looked young enough to be his daughter. He was playing the role of successful businessman on vacation, probably telling her stories about his important job and his bright future. When he finally returned to his boat, he wasn't alone. The young woman, a college-aged blonde in a sundress, followed him down the dock, giggling at something he'd said. "Jesus," Pete muttered. "The guy never learns." I watched through binoculars as Rick led the woman onto his boat. Through the cabin windows, I could see him pouring more wine, making expansive gestures as he told what were probably elaborate lies about his life and career. That's when I noticed the second figure moving around in the cabin. Someone else was on that boat. Claire. She appeared in the window for just a moment, long enough for me to recognize her silhouette. Then she disappeared again, probably hiding in the bedroom while Rick entertained his new victim. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Police ETA 30 minutes. Stay back and observe only. Do not engage." 30 minutes was too long. Rick was already making his move on the young woman, and Claire was somewhere on that boat, probably planning their next escape route. I made a decision that Pete would later describe as stupid but effective. I walked down the dock to slip 47 and knocked on the cabin door. "Rick, it's Adam Reno. We need to talk." The sounds from inside the cabin stopped abruptly. I could hear whispered conversation, then footsteps. Rick opened the door, trying to look casual but failing completely. "Adam, what a surprise. What brings you to Michigan?" "You do, and Claire. And the fact that you're both fugitives from justice." The young woman appeared behind Rick, looking confused. "Rick, who is this?" "Nobody important," Rick said. "Just an old acquaintance from Chicago." "I'm the guy whose wife Rick was sleeping with," I told her. "I'm also the guy who exposed him as an inappropriate predator at his company picnic 3 weeks ago." The woman's face went pale. She looked from me to Rick, processing this information. "That's not true," Rick said quickly. "This man is mentally unstable. He's been stalking me since his wife left him for someone better." "Really?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the video of Rick face-planting into the potato salad. "Does this look like the behavior of someone who's mentally stable?" The woman watched the video, her expression changing from confusion to disgust. "Oh my God, you're that guy. This is all over social media." "What?" Rick grabbed my phone, staring at the screen in horror. The video had gone viral. 2 million views and the counting. The comments were brutal. Executive meltdown. Potato salad justice. When karma comes to the company picnic. Rick's public humiliation had become a global phenomenon. I need to go, the young woman said, backing toward the dock. This is crazy! You're crazy! She hurried away, leaving Rick and me alone on the boat. That's when Claire emerged from the bedroom, wearing a bathrobe and a look of pure hatred. Hello, Claire, I said. Nice hideout, very romantic. What do you want, Adam? I want you to face the consequences of your actions, both of you. Rick stepped between us, trying to regain control of the situation. You need to leave. This is private property. Actually, it's a crime scene. The police will be here in about 20 minutes to arrest you both. Claire's face went white. You called the police? Detective Morrison is very interested in talking to you about your role in covering up Rick's harassment of those women. Turns out obstruction of justice is a felony. Rick grabbed my arm. You son of a witch! You've destroyed everything. No, Rick, you destroyed everything. I just made sure everyone could see it. That's when Rick made his final mistake. He swung at me, a wild haymaker that would have knocked me into the lake if it had connected. It didn't connect. I ducked under his punch and pushed him backward. Rick stumbled, tripped over a deck chair, and went crashing through the boat's railing into the harbor. The splash was tremendous. Claire screamed and ran to the edge of the boat. Rick, can you swim? Apparently Rick could swim, but not very well. He flailed around in the dark water, cursing and spitting, while I watched from the deck. You might want to help him, I told Claire. The water's pretty cold and hypothermia can set in quickly. Claire glared at me with pure hatred. I hope you're happy. I'm getting there. By the time the police arrived, Rick had been pulled from the water by marina security and was sitting on the dock, wrapped in a blanket and shivering uncontrollably. Claire was in handcuffs, having been caught trying to destroy evidence on the boat. Detective Morrison approached me as the suspects were loaded into police cars. Nice work, Mr. Reno. We've got them both on multiple charges. What happens now? Now they face trial. Rick's looking at serious prison time for the harassment charges, and Claire will likely plead down to a lesser charge in exchange for testimony against him. I watched as the police cars pulled away, taking Rick and Claire toward their long-overdue appointment with justice. So it's over? Pete asked. Not quite, I said. There's still one more thing I need to do. 6 months later, Rick Devlin was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for misconduct, harassment, misuse of power, and obstruction of justice. Claire received 2 years probation and community service in exchange for her testimony against Rick. I thought it was over. I thought justice had been served and I could move on with my life. I was wrong. The call came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was at home, working on a client's network security upgrade, when my phone rang. Adam Reno? Speaking. This is Rick Devlin. I think we need to talk. My blood went cold. You're supposed to be in prison. I got out early. Good behavior. Turns out I'm very good at following rules when my freedom depends on it. What do you want? I want my life back, my reputation, my career, everything you took from me. I didn't take anything from you. You lost it all by being a predator and a criminal. Rick's laugh was cold and bitter. You destroyed me, Adam. You humiliated me in front of hundreds of people, ruined my career, and sent me to prison. Now it's my turn. Your turn to what? To return the favor. I'll be seeing you soon. The line went dead. I immediately called Detective Morrison, but she was out of the office. I left a message explaining the situation and asking for advice. Then I called Pete. He's out of prison? Pete sounded incredulous. How's that possible? Good behavior, apparently. And he's planning some kind of revenge. What are you going to do? I'm going to be ready for him. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I installed additional security cameras around my house, changed all the locks, and set up motion sensors in the yard. I also reached out to Jennifer Martinez, Lisa Chen, and Sarah Williams to warn them that Rick was free. All 3 women were terrified. He knows where I work, Jennifer said when I called her. He knows where I live. What if he comes after me? He won't, I assured her. Rick's not interested in you anymore. He's focused on me. I hoped I was right. On Friday evening, I got my answer. I was in my kitchen making dinner when the power went out. Not just in my house, the entire block was dark. That's when I heard the voice from my backyard. Adam, come out and play. I looked through the kitchen window and saw a figure standing in my yard. Rick Devlin, but different. Prison had changed him. He was thinner, harder, and there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something dangerous. What do you want, Rick? I want you to feel what I felt. The humiliation, the helplessness. The knowledge that your life is over and there's nothing you can do about it. Your life isn't over. You served your time. You can start fresh. Start fresh? Rick laughed. Do you know what it's like to try to get a job when the first thing that comes up in a Google search is a video of you falling face first into potato salad? Maybe you should have thought of that before you started harassing women. Maybe you should have minded your own business. Rick stepped into the light from my kitchen window, and I saw that he wasn't alone. 2 other men flanked him, both large and intimidating. Meet my new friends, Rick said. Bruno and Eddie. They helped me adjust to prison life, and now they're helping me adjust to freedom. I recognized the type, ex-cons with nothing to lose, and no problem using violence to solve problems. This is between you and me, Rick. Leave them out of it. Oh, they're very much in it. You see, Bruno and Eddie have their own issues with people who cooperate with law enforcement. They're what you might call antisocial. I backed away from the window and grabbed my phone to call emergency. The line was dead. They'd cut the phone lines. That's when I heard the sound of breaking glass from the front of the house. They were coming in. I ran to my bedroom and grabbed the baseball bat I kept beside the bed. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The house was dark and quiet. I could hear them moving around downstairs, searching for me. Adam! Rick's voice echoed through the house. Come out, wherever you are. I crept to the top of the stairs and looked down. I could see flashlight beams moving through the living room. Check upstairs, Rick said. He's got to be here somewhere. Heavy footsteps started up the stairs. I retreated to my bedroom and locked the door, knowing it wouldn't hold them for long. That's when I remembered the security system I'd installed. The cameras were battery-powered and connected to a wireless network. Even with the power out, they were still recording. I grabbed my laptop and opened the security app. All 6 cameras were working, giving me a clear view of the entire house. Rick and his friends had split up. Bruno was coming up the stairs toward my bedroom. Eddie was searching the basement. Rick was in the kitchen, probably looking for tools. I had maybe 30 seconds before Bruno reached my door. I opened my bedroom window and looked down. It was a 12-foot drop to the roof of my garage. Risky, but better than facing Bruno in a confined space. I climbed out the window just as I heard Bruno trying my bedroom door. The garage roof was slippery with frost, but I managed to make it to the edge without falling. From there, it was an 8-foot drop to the ground. I landed hard, twisting my ankle, but I was mobile. Now what? I limped around to the front of the house and saw Rick's car parked in my driveway. A plan began to form. I pulled out my phone and realized I still had cell service. I called emergency and reported a break-in, then called Pete. Rick's at my house with 2 ex-cons. I whispered, they're trying to end me. Jesus Christ, where are you? Hiding in my front yard. The police are on the way, but I need backup. I'm 10 minutes out. I hung up and focused on the task at hand. Rick wanted to humiliate me? Fine, but turnabout is fair play. I crept to Rick's car and looked inside. The keys were still in the ignition. Rick had gotten arrogant in his planning. I opened the hood and disconnected the battery cables, then let the air out of all 4 tires. Rick's escape vehicle was now useless. That's when I heard shouting from inside the house. He's gone! The window's open! Find him! Check the yard! I saw flashlight beams moving toward the windows. In a few seconds, they'd be outside looking for me. I needed a better hiding spot. I remember the storm drain that ran under my driveway. It was large enough for a person to crawl through and connected to the city's drainage system. Not comfortable, but safe. I lifted the drain cover and lowered myself into the concrete tunnel just as Bruno emerged from the house. From my hiding spot, I could hear everything. Where is he? Rick demanded. Gone, Bruno replied. Must have gone out the window. Check the neighbors' houses. He couldn't have gotten far. I waited in the cold, damp tunnel, listening to them search for me. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, I heard sirens in the distance. The police had arrived. I climbed out of the storm drain and walked toward the flashing lights. 3 patrol cars had surrounded my house, and officers were taking Rick, Bruno, and Eddie into custody. Detective Morrison arrived just as they were loading Rick into a police car. Mr. Reno, are you all right? I'm fine. Cold and wet, but fine. What happened here? I explained the evening's events while paramedics checked my twisted ankle. Rick had violated his parole by leaving the state. associating with known criminals, and committing breaking and entering. He was going back to prison for a long time. As the police cars pulled away, Pete arrived with a bottle of bourbon and a grin. "So," he said, looking at my disheveled appearance, "how was your evening?" "Educational," I replied. "I learned that storm drains are really uncomfortable. And Rick learned that some people don't stay victims." I looked at my house with its broken windows and damaged front door. It would take time and money to repair, but it was still standing, like me. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said. "What's that?" "Rick could have just disappeared after he got out of prison. Started over somewhere else, built a new life. But he couldn't let it go. He had to come back for revenge. And now he's going back to prison for even longer. Some people never learn." Pete opened the bourbon and poured 2 glasses. "To people who never learn," he said, raising his glass. "And to people who do," I replied. We drank to that, standing in the wreckage of what had been Rick's final, failed attempt at revenge. 6 months later, Rick was sentenced to an additional 10 years in prison for parole violation, breaking and entering, and conspiracy. Bruno and Eddie received 5 years each. Claire had moved to California and was working as a receptionist at a dental office. She sent me a letter apologizing for everything that had happened and asking for forgiveness. I never replied. Jennifer Martinez got her job back at Meridian Plaza, along with a promotion and a significant raise. Lisa Chen was hired by a tech startup and was thriving in her new role. Sarah Williams had been promoted to marketing director and was engaged to a nice guy from accounting. As for me, I sold my house and bought a smaller place across town. Pete and I expanded our IT consulting business, specializing in cybersecurity for small companies. Business was good. I never married again, but I dated occasionally. I'd learned to be more careful about the people I let into my life, more aware of the signs that someone might not be who they pretended to be. The whole experience had taught me something important. Justice isn't something that happens to you. It's something you make happen. Sometimes the system works, and sometimes you have to work the system. Rick Devlin had thought he could destroy people's lives without consequences. He'd thought his position and his connections made him untouchable. He was wrong. Some people learn from their mistakes. Others repeat them until they destroy themselves. Rick had chosen destruction. I had chosen justice. In the end, that made all the difference.